Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, a podcast to encourage, educate, and equip you to care for children and youth through adoption, foster, and kinship care. Hosted by an adoptive mom with over 22 years of kinship and adoptive parenting experience. She's on this journey with you. Please welcome Sandra Flach.
From inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. He said, "In my distress, I called to the Lord, and he answered me. From deep in the realm of the dead, I called for help, and you listened to my cry." That is Jonah chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. I'm Sandra Flach. Welcome to this episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey. I love the scripture from Jonah, these verses about second chances. We have a real second chance story for you today, and I can't wait for you to meet our guest. But first, a reminder about some vital resources that we have for you. Check out this.
Natalie Vecchione of the FASD Hope podcast and Sandra Flach of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast would like to invite you to join their Hope for the FASD Journey, a virtual support community for parents and caregivers raising individuals with an FASD, diagnosed or not. This faith-based community includes an online bi-monthly support group, a monthly VIP conversation, and a private Facebook group which includes a video devotional from Natalie and Sandra every Saturday. To register, visit justicefororphans.ny.org/training/FASD.
So I always like to remind everybody about FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. It is a spectrum of disorders that affects people who were exposed to alcohol in the womb. It impacts 1 in 20 school-age children across the United States, and especially higher percentages in adoptive and foster placements. As a mom myself of 2 teenagers with FAS, fetal alcohol syndrome, I know how difficult and how isolating this parenting journey can be when our kiddos have been prenatally exposed. So you are not alone. I'm here to provide support and vital resources because I know how challenging it can be, and I don't want you to go it alone. Our support group is just such a lifeline for so many of us on this journey. So I hope you will check that out. I also offer coaching sessions for parents and caregivers, along with in-person and online FASD workshops. I am a certified facilitator of the Facet neurobehavioral model, and I'm passionate about not only teaching about FASD, but equipping families and helping them develop strategies and resources and accommodations to help their kids be more successful at home and at school and out in the community. So I hope that you'll check that out. I do have a free introductory workshop coming up on Wednesday, March 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern time. It's a free, I call it a lunch and learn. It's an introduction to FASD. It's 60 minutes of content of me teaching, and then I do stay on the call so that we can do some Q&A. And it's great for parents who are just starting to realize maybe maybe prenatal exposure happened. Maybe this is explaining what's going on with the big behaviors with our kiddos, or maybe you're kind of already in there. You know what's going on, but other people in your kids' lives, maybe they're not aware of what's going on, and grandparents and adult siblings, next door neighbors, babysitters, school teachers, youth group leaders, anyone really interacting with your kiddos, they would benefit from this training as well. So it's free. They just have to sign up on our website. And so to go to our website for any of our training, for any of our resources, the support group, to contact me, any of that, all of the above, go to our website, justicefororphansny.org, and you can click on the training tab at the top of the page. In the drop-down menu, you see FASD. Click there, and you'll be able to find all of our FASD resources. So we want to be a support to all adoptive and foster parents and even kinship caregivers on this journey. So along those lines, please subscribe to this podcast, follow it, whatever platform you're listening on, whether it's from your Apple phone or device, YouTube, because we are now releasing the video versions of this podcast if you wanted to watch the podcast as opposed to just listening. Follow us, like us, leave a review. That really, really helps us to be able to be more accessible to families who need the support and the encouragement that we offer through the podcast and through our other resources. So now, with all that out of the way, to our guest. I'm super excited to chat today with Pam Willis. Pam and her husband, Gary, raised 5 kids and started fostering back in 2013 when their youngest 2 were in 7th and 9th grades. 6 years later, they met a sibling set of 7 in need of a second chance. And that's when their adoption journey began. So I can't wait to unpack this story. So please welcome to the show, adoptive mom, Pam Willis. Hey, Pam, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm so excited to be here. I really appreciate you inviting me.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you taking the time. I know you've got a busy schedule too, and I just love your story, and I'm so excited for our listeners to get to hear from you, a fellow adoptive mom. But you started fostering, and I know you and Gary, your husband, have 5 biological children, and they were pretty much grown when you stepped into the foster care arena. So tell us what led to that decision.
That's right. So I was a nurse for 14 years and I worked in labor and delivery. And so, of course, I would see the occasional situation where, maybe Child Protective Services was stepping in, or there was a foster, family that was receiving a child. And my heart just always went out to those children in those situations. At the time, I didn't understand, very much about the situation, but I knew that it was something that I wanted to do in the future if the opportunity arose. And so I always would tell my husband, oh, there was this baby today, and then it went with, these social workers, and I just felt bad, but I wanted to hug it and hold it and make sure it knew it was safe, and can we take babies like that? And my husband would always say, someday, maybe, someday, honey, like we're pretty busy with our 5 right now.
Yeah.
And so it was just always kind of in the back of my mind as a someday thing. And I really sort of thought of it as, oh, well, when all of my kids are out of the house, because my husband and I were young parents, I felt like I won't be that old when they're all out of the house. So, maybe I can do it then. And always just thinking about fostering, of course, not thinking like I would start a whole other family or anything. It's just like, I want to help. I want to be part of that situation. I'm a nurse. I understand a lot about, trauma and the things to do to make children feel safe. And I just felt I had something to offer. So that's how we sort of came to, the decision that we were going to do it. And in 2013, with only 1 middle schooler and 1 high schooler left in my home, I did kind of feel like I had a lot of extra time after, raising the 5. And so I thought, well, maybe this is the time. Maybe we can do this, just maybe 1, we'll start with 1 foster child and see how it goes. And so my husband and I just jumped into the training, and the rest was history.
Wow. So were you primarily fostering babies, or over those years it was whoever came?
We said 0 to 5 at first, just because I was thinking that it would be easier for me not to, because I was still working. So at that time I had changed careers and I was working from home, But, it was an office job. I had to be on the computer. And so my plan was always that I had a nanny who would take care of my foster child downstairs while I was working upstairs. And if I needed to come down, I could come up and down as much as I needed through the day. And so we thought, well, let's do 0 to 5. Let's not do school yet, because we don't want to, involve anybody having to drive someone to school or go back and forth. And so that was how we kind of came upon our decision to start with that age. And also I had, of course, a preteen boy and a teenage girl. So I was like, well, I can't do teenagers because I don't want to introduce, the opposite gender in the home at the same time. So that, that played into it as well at that time. And so we started, our classes were wonderful. We had gone through a private agency and really felt a lot of support from them as we went through the journey and the home study and all of those things. And we were just really, really ready to do it. So we never ever did just take one at a time. Everyone who's done foster care knows how that goes. So they very rarely come as a single.
Right. That's right. So you're fostering about 6 years, and then you discovered a sibling set of 7 who needed a second chance, really. So can you share with us how that all played out?
Sure. So at that time, we were actually still fostering. We had a couple of our kids had gone home. We had kids from 2 different families. And so we did have one baby at the time. But he was getting ready to go be adopted by a family member. So we were just kind of waiting for the family member's home study and all of that. And so we were kind of at a crossroads at that point. My husband and I were thinking, so that child who had been in middle school when we started was now graduating. And we were kind of thinking, well, maybe we should sell this big old house, and, maybe because we're down to, this foster baby's going to be going somewhere soon, and we'll kind of be at the moment, without anyone. So what should we do? And we were kind of like, this is the time to figure out if we want to do something, because we wouldn't be disrupting anyone's, placement or anything. So we tossed around some ideas, but we just felt like, I don't know, we just didn't really want to sell the house, but we felt like, well, we probably should, because it's a big 6-bedroom house. It's just me and my husband, clunking around in here. And my son was already 1 foot out the door as he was graduating, So we sort of hemmed and hawed about it. And one day I was scrolling through social media and I saw a repost of a news story of these children, and there was a picture of them all lined up, and it said 7 siblings in need of forever home. And it was posted by a friend of mine, not someone who fostered or had anything to do with the foster adoption system, but he was just trying. He posted something like, if anyone can help this family or something. And of course I clicked on it and I thought, oh, 7, like no one is going to be able to take 7. I know how that goes. Like they have a hard time even placing 4, and like immediately the next thought was, you have room to take 7. And it just really hit me like a ton of bricks. And I thought, oh my gosh, like I'd never thought about adoption. I hadn't thought, I was like, I'm a foster parent. Like this wasn't something that I had ever really wrapped my brain around, but it was just this instant feeling of connection. And it was this feeling like no one else can do this but you. And I know that wasn't probably true. I'm sure someone else would have been able to do it or come along, but that feeling was so strong in me that I just had to immediately call the number and find out, what the situation was and put my information in.
Wow. And you did that without your husband knowing that you were inquiring about 7 more kids?
No. So I went to my husband a couple hours later. I had seen the post, while I was working. I was on the computer, just, taking a break on social media or what have you. And I thought, well, I'll tag my husband in this post and then he can read it. And then I'll talk to him about it later. And so I went downstairs later, and I said, "Hey, honey, did you see the post that I tagged you in?" And he said, "About the 7 children?" I said, "Yeah." And he just got really kind of like quiet for a second. He said, "We should adopt them." And I
Wow.
was stunned. I was absolutely stunned. I thought, there's no way, I'm never going to talk him into this. I was coming down prepared for all the reasons why I needed to convince him that these were already my children. And he just had that really strong feeling as well. That was the first thing he said to me. And then I sort of flipped the tables on him. I said, "You want to adopt 7 children?" And I sort of like started questioning him, like, "What are you thinking?" kind of thing. And he said, "I don't know. I just feel bad for them. And like, we have all this room, and like, we could do it. We know how to do this. We know how to raise kids." And, and I was like, "Okay, well, let me call. Let's see what happens. And if it's meant to be, they'll call me back." And, so that's how it started.
Wow, what an incredible story. And I love how God just, weaves it all together, gets you on the same page. So what happened from there? So how did you get to meet them? What were those next steps?
So I called and gave my information, and and I said, I was in the next county. And so I knew that was a little bit of a hurdle, but if they're looking, so widely on the news, that it probably wasn't going to be an issue. There's not, tons of families around that even have the space for 7. And so I said, I'm in the next county, but I am certified, and I do have space for them. I have a 6-bedroom home. I have a large vehicle, because we always kept a large van, so we could take our kids or their spouses or, anybody.
Yeah.
So I said, I already have a large vehicle. Of course, I have car seats and all these things because I've been fostering for so long. And they were like, "Oh, okay." So they kind of escalated me to the next, person to talk to. And then they escalated me again to another person to talk to. And I think it was like a couple days later, I got a call from the actual caseworker. And so I was like, "Oh, okay, this is big time if the caseworker is calling me." And every moment that went between those days, I was just like, I wanted to call every single day. And I kept looking at the picture, and I kept watching the video, and I kept thinking, I hope my kids are okay. And I mean, honestly, they were already mine in my heart. And I just kept thinking, I hope they're okay. And I hope they hurry up. And, I would try to tell myself, okay, well, maybe they found someone for them. As long as they're taken care of, I guess they'll be okay. But I just really, I wanted to call like every hour of every day. And I thought, well, I can't do that. They'll think I'm just crazy. And they'll be like, "We're not calling her back." So when the social worker called me, and we had a long talk, like maybe an hour, and we started finding all of these things that, really would fit well for the kids. For example, they had some ties to Las Vegas, and they had some like family friends that were pretty much kind of their only family. And they had a half sister there. And so the social workers were like, they do have this connection. How do you feel about any connection with others? And I said, "Oh, I think it's so important. And I would be so happy to, allow that and facilitate that." And I said, "Besides, my adult daughter lives in Las Vegas, and we go there all the time." And they were like, "Oh, that's great." So that was sort of a point in my favor. And then they asked me, the kids, they do have a church that they like, and they're wondering if they can be taken to church. And I said, of course, church is really important to us. And then the social worker said, they go to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I said, "Oh, so do we." So it was just an immediate, okay, there's another check mark in our favor. They had been exposed to that church just briefly, and during their time in foster care, that was the only thing they could remember as like safety and warmth and feeling God's love. And so they had asked, they wanted to feel that love again. And so it was just sort of a beautiful thing to say. Of course, we're very active in our church, and so they would be, they'd be with us every week. That's not a problem at all. So it was just a really nice conversation with the social worker. And of course, she said, we have a lot of things to go through. We have a lot of, people to talk to. There were thousands of calls about this. And I thought, okay, thousands, she's kind of preparing me that maybe I'm not, the one. And so now I have a really good friendship with this social worker now, and we've kept close all these years. And what she says is she wanted to call me every day, but she didn't want to seem crazy. And I told her the same thing. I wanted to call every day, but I thought, well, I better not call that social worker. I better give it 3 days. So I would make myself wait before I called and say, how are the kids doing? And, just checking on them. And I'm thinking about them a lot. And so it progressed from there. That was January. And then they asked me, they came out, they interviewed my husband and I, in person. They talked to us about some of the issues that the kids had, which, we were like, sure. I mean, that's what we would expect, from kids in trauma and coming through the system. And the kids had lost their parents both in an accident, both parents. And the kids were in the accident with them. So aside from the trauma of the living circumstances that they had gone through with, domestic violence and drugs and homelessness and things like that were part of their childhood, they also had to witness their parents' death. And so this was hugely traumatic and, affected all of them differently. But it was something that I was very committed to taking on and, and helping them through. And so it even more, it sort of evoked the nurse in me, like I can help. I can help these kids, and so we were, sort of given all the information, and we're in California. So in California, you must foster 6 months before you can adopt a child. And so they were coming to us as foster, but potential, matched for adoption, potential adoption. And so they said, okay, we think we want to match you. Would you make, a little book for the kids or something to kind of give them, information about you? So I made one book for each kid and I put pictures there. I made scrapbook. I was like, these are our bedrooms. This is our backyard. This is our church. And I kind of tried to do anything I could to think, okay, if these kids are being told that there's this family that wants them, I try to put myself in their position and think, okay, they don't know anything. They don't know if we're good people, bad people, if we're, scary or whatever. So I put pictures of me. I said, this is my name and I like the color purple and I love chocolate and this is my husband, his name and what he likes. And then I did put our oldest son in there too, because he was still kind of in and out, of the house a lot. So he would be here. This is Sam, our oldest, our youngest, but would be older than them. And I said, he likes this and that, so we're just people basically. And these are the kind of people we are. And this is where we live and this is what we do. And I sent those books down and the kids just loved them. And the social workers were like, oh, this is so great. It's just the best thing. And we got to meet them in March. So that was February, 2 months. It was about almost exactly 2 months to the time we got to meet them. And we met them and we thought, okay, ahead of time, my husband and I were driving there. We're like, this is going to be a lot. It's going to be overwhelming. They're probably going to have lots of issues, because poor kids have been through just so much and we just couldn't fathom. And so we get to a park and we're meeting them at the park and we're just like kid after kid after kid that we're talking to one-on-one. We're just like, gosh, what a great kid. And then this one, what a great kid, what a great kid. And we're just we got in the car after that meeting and we were like, wow, these are really great kids. It was just incredible that, we felt their spirits, their true spirits just immediately, whatever issues or traumas that they had, we knew they were there, but we just immediately were able to see through those things and just see their hearts. And we were just in love with them instantaneously.
Wow.
We drove home that day. We were just like, oh my gosh, I love these kids. When can we see them again?
Wow.
And Yeah, so it was a little torturous because we had to wait until June for them to move in. They wanted them to be allowed to finish school in
Sure.
their current locations because two of them had a graduation. There was an 8th grade graduation and a 6th grade graduation for the two oldest. And so we thought, okay, but we want to visit them as much as we
Yeah.
can. They lived about an hour away from us. And so we would go as much as they would allow us to go every weekend. The foster mom was kind of resistant to disrupting their schedule too much. Of course, I'm sure it was really disruptive to have these people come in and, we're like, oh, we're going to, talk about all these fun things that we're going to do, but go back to your foster home for now.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it was a little tough for her too, but after that couple months, after a month, we started doing some overnights on the weekends and just transitioning into it. And by the time they moved in, they were so ready. They were like, can we go now? Can we go now?
Yeah. Oh, wow. So
it was great.
How old were the kids when you formally adopted them, when they came?
When they first came, before, like when they moved in, they were 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 11 and 14. 11 and 13.
2, 3, 4,
So,
5, and 6, and 11 and 14.
yeah.
Wow.
11 and 13.
13.
Yeah. And so, or actually, I think she was 11. So, I mean, they were just, the little ones were just, little stair steps,
Yeah.
1 a year. And, in so many ways, they were delayed, especially the youngest ones. They were delayed in speech, they were delayed in just, emotional maturity, things like that. Of course, the oldest daughter was very parentified and had such, extreme responsibility for them and was very much their mother and very much their protector, which, we worked on for so long for me to just say, you're allowed to be a kid and just chill and not have to worry about it. And I just had to keep reminding her until she knew, in her heart that they were safe.
Yeah.
It took her a while to let go, and I totally understood that. And the oldest boy, he's one of those that, so he had a huge amount of responsibility taking care of them as well. Often the two oldest would be left alone for days with the kids in their apartment, and they would just have to try to figure out what to feed them, or where they could find food, or they had to sometimes steal food. And so they had a lot of this sort of responsibility, but it's interesting the way they both dealt with it. When Ruby, the oldest daughter, when she continued to be parentified and continued to be concerned about everything that happened with them in every way, almost too much, where she had a hard time letting go. And Addie, the oldest, he was one of those that had like complete memory block of almost his entire childhood. And he just didn't remember anything. He didn't remember the accident. He didn't remember so many things. People would say, do you remember the time, Ruby would say, remember the time the police came? And he was like, no, I don't remember that at all. And he truly didn't. He was just so traumatized. And that was the way he dealt with it. And he just needed calm and safety for a long time to be able to start processing. So, that's just one example of how different they were. And all seven of them were just a little bit different in how they needed to be, taken care of and needed to be reassured and needed to feel their safety. There were food issues, there were, all kinds of issues that, and aside from that, of course, they had nothing of their own because the car accident, they were actually in the process of moving out of state when the car had crashed. And so everything they owned had been in a U-Haul, and the U-Haul was destroyed, and there was, all their belongings were destroyed. So they really just had nothing that, very, very, very few things that could be salvaged, a ring or a shirt of dad's or, something like that. So there was a lot of work to do. I was really grateful for my years in foster care that gave me so much experience and understanding of the kinds of things that they would need.
Yeah, it's incredible, but that understanding and training that you had, definitely necessary, because I can only imagine the trauma. There had been trauma even before the accident with
Right.
things going on, and then trauma, because it sounds like these kids, they were like kids that would come into care, like that you had
Right.
been fostering
Right.
previously, but then the trauma with an accident and losing both parents, and the kids were in the accident, you said.
Right, right. So they all had injuries. The oldest two had the most severe injuries, and it sort of got, less severe as they got. The younger ones had less severe injuries. The oldest two had to be, taken in helicopter. They had, major injuries. So the oldest girl, Ruby, she was in the hospital for close to a month, I think.
Wow.
And this was all, of course, before I knew them or knew of their story. But, I don't even think they had processed any of that yet. It was like they were so in survival mode, and they were just there. I didn't realize it as much at the time because I didn't have a comparison, but I look at pictures of them now and their eyes were just so sad, and their eyes were just kind of hollow. Like there was just like not a lot there. They were so guarded, and so just they were sad, they were sad kids, and we just got to work right away on all of it. And it's been, just a beautiful journey and a wonderful thing to watch them heal over the last 5 years.
Incredible. And the fact that they can all seven be together, that's really miraculous, because it's hard to keep siblings together, and that's not even
Right.
considering how many of them there are. So
Right.
clearly a big adjustment for them coming into your family, but
Yeah.
also a big adjustment for your family, because you have all these older kids. Your youngest
Right.
biological son was in and out, but you do have older kids. So what did they all think of this?
I think it was a good thing that we had fostered for so long prior, because they were used to, an extra couple kids being at every family event, and always were so kind and so loving to these kids, with Thanksgiving, if they didn't live in the house and, see the child all the time, like, my youngest ones did still when we were fostering. My older two that were already married, my older three actually were already married. They would come to, family events, and they'd be like, "Oh, hi, who's this? And how are you?" And just so sweet and so kind always. Like they never were like, "What's this kid doing here?" It was just, they knew we fostered. They had this heart that we had, to care for someone that was in a hard situation, and they always did their best to make those children feel welcome. And when it came to the time where we were considering the adoption, I talked to all the children individually. I said, I really want to know how you feel about it. And they had differing opinions. By then we had some grandchildren.
Mhm.
And so, one of my kids was like, "Well, is it going to take away, from you being a grandma?" And like, that's a valid concern.
Sure.
I think that's understandable because I adore my grandchildren. And, I said, my heart has limitless capacity. I can take care of all of them at the same time. And I said, my grandchildren will always be so special, and they will be my grandchildren no matter what, and I'll make time for them. And I said, and besides, a lot of my grandchildren are the same age as these kids, so they're going to have a blast playing together. And so he was reassured. And then another one was like, "Okay, well, financially, are you guys going to be okay, Mom?" Like, they had like their different concerns. Mom, you're not the youngest anymore. Okay, thank you. And so, financially, you're not going to like use up your savings. And so I assured him, we're going to be fine. And I think my girls, they automatically had that motherly heart. Like, absolutely, you must take them. There's absolutely no one better. They were just, my daughter, she was 25 at the time. She said, "Mom, we had the greatest childhood." It was so sweet to hear her say that. She said, "Why would I deny anyone else that opportunity to be raised by you and have that great childhood?" I thought that was such a sweet thing to say, and such a wonderful insight for her to have. And so they all were really just very accepting of it. If they had a concern, I reassured them. And I think as they met the kids and realized what great kids they were like, okay, this is going to be okay. And of course it was an adjustment, but it wasn't ever like, oh, we're not talking to you. We're not coming over, nothing like that. It was like, you have to understand that their mom is the mom who decided to go to law school when I had 5 of them. My youngest was starting kindergarten, and I said, let's go to law school. They've watched their mom do crazy things, impossible things. So they were probably like, okay, well, yeah, that's my mom.
There you go. It's in the DNA, right?
Right.
So Pam, how old is everybody now and how are they doing?
I think they're doing really well. The oldest of the 7 is 18. He'll be 19 in June. And he's getting ready to he wanted to go to a tech school and learn some sort of technical skill. He's a really smart kid. And so I suggested electrician or, a trade school. And he said, I want to be a lineman. I want to climb up on those poles and do dangerous things. And I said, okay, so that's where he's headed, is to lineman school in April. And he's really excited about that. He's been just kind of, working and saving money and having the experience of still, I know he's 18, but he's still kind of, he's a young teenager because he missed out on so many years. It's the same with, so many foster children as they're going through the system and they're going through their life of, sort of this neglect that they have and the trauma that they have. They get behind on, just experiencing life. And so I really felt this need for him to be, just to be gentle with him and to allow him some extra time to do the things that, maybe a normal teenager would do. And that just, I gave him some grace in that. And I just told him there's no rush, you're not being kicked out. He was kind of like, I'm 18, I got to go. And I was like, no, you don't have to go anywhere first of all. And so that's him. And then the next oldest is 16, Ruby. She's a junior in high school. And she is a firecracker. That's how we'll describe her. That girl I knew from the day I saw her on the video that, she was explaining everything, and she was very parentified. Like I said, I knew from day one that she was going to be my one that was going to take a lot of attention. And she has, but the relationship we've developed has just been really, really neat over the years of her healing and, all of the time that we've gone through, and her just being reassured over and over again of the love and safety that she has. And it took her a long time to believe me, that I'll love you no matter what. It took a really long time for her to believe that. I think, she finally believes it after 5 years. And so next is Alicia. She's our 12-year-old. She just turned 12 yesterday. So she is just started middle school, super smart girl. They're all really intelligent. Actually, it's very cool to see their little brains function. And so she's, a straight A student. She's, very focused on her grades, and she's a little bit of a perfectionist. And I always tell her, you don't have to be perfect. I'll love you no matter what. If you get a B, it's okay. So that's her. And then next we have 2 birthdays coming up. So we have Anthony, who's turning 11. And then Aubriella 2 weeks later. We have birthdays 2 weeks apart. So February and March, we have 3 birthdays, all 2 weeks apart. So Anthony's turning 11. Aubriella is turning 10. And then we have summer birthdays for the other 2. So right now they're 8 and 7. And in the summer they'll be 9 and 8 and 9.
It's hard to keep track of, I know.
Yeah. So especially when we're in the middle of birthdays, because normally I can count the numbers, 8, 9, 10,
Yes.
11, that's how old they are. But then when we get to March, I'm like, oh, wait.
Yeah. And I have
So,
8 kids total, and I know everybody's birth date and year, but as my adult kids get older, it's like once you pass 21 and then you pass 30, I can't be responsible for knowing how old you are, but I can tell you when your birthday is, right? I need a calculator
right,
to figure out your age, right?
right. Because then I have to add grandchildren into the mix of
Yeah.
birthday remembrance, right?
Yes. Wow. And so the
Yeah.
little ones, the youngest ones, how are they all doing?
They're doing really well. The youngest 3, they the youngest 3 boys, they have diagnosed fetal alcohol spectrum disorder.
Oh, yes.
And it's really more common than I think we know. I look back at some of my previous placements and think, gosh, I think they had that too,
Yeah.
1 or 2 of them. And so it was interesting for me to learn about that. And
Yes.
I never understood that there was a spectrum of fetal alcohol exposure. I knew about fetal alcohol syndrome, but I never understood the spectrum of it. And we had some reliable sources from their parents' past that gave us the information that said, yeah, she was drinking, and so we knew that had taken place along with the drugs. But we found out that alcohol was, really one of the most dangerous substances
Yes.
that, affects children so deeply. But very interestingly, it has affected the 3 boys very differently.
Mhm.
One of them has some learning disabilities. Another one, I would say my youngest, he's about almost 2 years behind in school.
Yep.
And that's the way he started. When he came to me as a 2-year-old, almost 3, he was about like a 1-year-old. I remember, he could barely speak. He was very much like all over the place with, exploring everything with his hands and putting things in his mouth like a child, a baby would do.
Mhm.
And I told the social worker at the time, I said, the reason it's difficult is because he's, a baby, but he's got a body of an almost 3-year-old, so he can climb up on things and he can
Yeah.
get to everything. He's
Yeah.
up on the counters, and so he was just a interesting challenge at first. My husband and I were just constantly following these kids around and making sure, come to find out after about a year with us that they, when they settled in and everything, they did make some diagnoses of ADHD, which we also know is common with
Yep.
trauma and all of that, and the fetal alcohol. It all goes together, And so we went through all the process of learning about that, the medications, and getting them on their dosages and everything. So they're all just doing so well, things that I hadn't expected at first. I really couldn't discern in the beginning what their capacity was going to be, because I'd never dealt with the fetal alcohol spectrum disorder before. I just saw what I saw, and I learned that you just meet them where they are. If they act like a 1-year-old, you sort of let them develop. You let them develop into a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old, and you try to be, age appropriate, adjusted age appropriate, right? And so I learned about this, and that's just what I did as far as the way I communicated with them, the expectations I had for them on behavior, because it's easy to say, oh, well, you're 3 or you're 4, you shouldn't be doing this still. But you have to remember that they really, like, emotionally, they're not 3 or 4, they're still 1 or 2. And so it was a learning curve in that way to, okay, you get 1 minute timeout, for a 4-year-old. Normally you'd be like, no, you got to sit longer. But for him, that's all that he could handle. And that's, it still meant something to him. And so those types of adjustments were, a learning curve for us. But the things that they've accomplished just have really exceeded what my expectations were, because I just said, whatever will be, will be. We're here to facilitate as much as they can grow, and I know that they still have so much more growth to do, but I've been so pleased with their progress in everything, their behaviors, their impulse control that they had to learn, that goes along with the ADHD, their educational challenges that they've had. They just all love school. They never want to stay home. They always want to go. They have really great resources at school. We were really blessed to get them into a great school. So they really just are doing wonderfully.
That's wonderful. And I didn't know about the FASD because my youngest two that we adopted internationally, they're teenagers now, but they both have fetal alcohol syndrome diagnoses.
Okay.
And then just
Yeah.
along our parenting journey, I ended up becoming a certified facilitator of the facets model because
Oh, great.
when they became teenagers, all of that stuff, the impulse control and the
Right.
dysmaturity and the learning challenges and the
Right.
processing information and all of the executive function stuff,
Mhm.
it just became so much harder. So
Right.
I took a deep dive into that world to understand what is this FASD, because we have attachment, we have connection. There's so many other great things going on, but what
Yeah.
on earth is what is this, the impulsivity and things like that. So
Right.
I got professional training, and then I offer a professional training. So we have
That's
lots of
great.
resources through our nonprofit to be able to support families. We have a support group for parents, an online support group for
Mhm.
families who have kiddos who are prenatally exposed, online training, all kinds of things. And many of our listeners of this podcast are all parents of kiddos with FASD, diagnosed or not. So
Yeah. Right.
I did not know that part of your story. So my face probably lit up when you said that, because it's a common journey. And most
Yeah.
families, adoptive and foster parents don't even know, because there isn't a diagnosis, or they haven't had any understanding of that. And they're just dealing with those really big behaviors and wondering
Right.
what on earth is going on, without
Right.
understanding that, the behaviors are just symptoms of a brain-based condition caused by that
Right.
prenatal alcohol exposure. So that's an incredible,
Yeah.
that
And it was such a blessing the way that diagnosis came about, because I didn't have that background or understanding even through my fostering time, which is a shame. It should have been
right.
something that there was more training on. I think that still lacks. And so I think your resources are much needed. But we were just referred to a clinic in San Diego. Is a big clinic, pediatric
Yes.
hospital, and they referred us for it was called like genetics and something like, something to do with maybe birth defects or something. They wanted to see if there was anything that they could figure out that was medically behind the delays that
Right.
the kids had. And so we just went in thinking, oh, maybe they're going to tell us, do some blood tests or something like that, and maybe they're just going to check, genetic stuff or something. We weren't sure. And in walks like one of the top experts in fetal alcohol spectrum disorder that happened to be in that clinic there in San Diego. And he immediately was like, it sounds like this. And he started asking me all these questions. I was like, yep, yep, yep. And just started ticking off the boxes. And then he asked me about alcohol consumption, and I called their half sister. She's older, so she was like 20 at the time. And I said, do you know, I actually talked to her during the visit. I was texting her, I think, do you know about her drinking at all during pregnancy? She said, oh yeah, absolutely. She was trying. I said, okay, well,
There you
I guess we
go.
know what's going
Yeah.
on. So, and that was confirmed, by a couple of other really close friends that she had in Las Vegas, that the kids still stay in touch with, because that's really their only family. Their parents actually grew up in foster care. So they really
Wow.
didn't have, when they say there was no one to take them, there really was no one. These parents were
Wow.
just on their own, no support, no resources, a product of the system,
Yeah.
and it just was that cycle. So yeah, that's how that came about. And I was really feeling blessed to have that information so early on, because I knew exactly, what to do and how to target it. And I'm sure there will be more as they become teenagers. I have one of them that really, really struggles with the behavior stuff. He's still young. And I know that, working on it now and working on those things as he grows is going to help. But all those different, the hormones come in and I know it's going to be a whole nother ball game. So
it definitely becomes more challenging because mine are 18 and 20 right now. And it does get harder in the teenage years. And then also the gap is more obvious between their neurotypical peers and where they're at. And that poses challenges as well. So, and they don't outgrow it, but they can definitely learn, and they just need lots of accommodations and supports to be safe, and to be successful. So, it's a big part of the story. So real quick, I wanted to ask you, so life is busy, right? You've got 7 kids at home, you've got adult kids, you've got grandkids. So, what is a day in the life like? Because this is your second family almost, right? I can relate because I have all my adult kids are out of the house. Our youngest 2 are still home. So it's almost like, a second life. So we're older at this point, right? So do you have help? I know earlier you mentioned you had a nanny at one point. So do you have help and support at home? How do you do all what you do?
The funny thing about the way my husband and I's situation has worked out is that, in our younger years as parents, when we were raising our first 5, I was more the primary parent. I was going to school, or I began working as a nurse, which is typically a 3-day, 12-hour shifts, and then I'm home 4 days. So I did the most of the hands-on, stay-at-home parenting stuff. And now at this point in our lives, my husband was military, and then he worked for the post office for another 15 years, and he retired from both right about maybe 3 months in, when the kids moved in about 3 or 4 months later. And we knew he was headed that way, which is another reason why we knew that we would be able to manage this, because we knew that he was going to be full-time available to them, and we knew that was important with this many of them. So my husband is the official stay-home dad. He drives our big Ford Transit, bus-looking Amazon delivery van. He drives to school every day. The kids all go to the same school. It's a K through 12, and so he drives to school, and everyone knows him. And he's, "Hi, Mr. Willis," and he takes them to the doctor appointments, and then he just puts me on FaceTime at the doctor appointments, because I'm, here at my desk working, but I can, the wonders of modern technology, I can be right there with my nursing brain to say, oh, what about this or maybe that? But he's the one that does all the running around. He does almost all of the cooking. And it's been a blessing to see him dig into that role. And it's been a little bit of a chuckle for me as well to see some of his frustrations and think, oh, okay, now you get it. We don't always have that opportunity to switch roles like that. But I think it really is the perfect setup. I mean, I've worked at home for 13 years, so far before, everyone had to learn to telecommute with the pandemic. I worked at home already. And so, the kids come home from school every day. They run straight up to my office. They stand in line and take turns to tell me what they want to tell me. And that's our little routine. And then they go back downstairs and they have a snack and they do their chores, and dad watches over the chores and starts the homework and cooks dinner. And then I finish at 5 and we have dinner together. So, I mean, that's a normal day. But there's always, little tweaks in that when they're in sports. So they've all played soccer, which they loved. That was the first time they ever, had an opportunity to play organized sports, and they just all loved it so much. And so they've played for 3 years now. And soccer season is always complete insanity in our house, because we have 5 kids going to 5 different fields for practice 2 times a week each. and it's from like August to November is always just insanity. And so that, obviously the schedule is different then. Also, my second oldest son lives down the street with his three children, so they're over here all the time.
Wow.
He'll drop them off. Hey, can you watch the kids for a minute? I gotta do this. And sure, bring them over, because the kids love to play together. Again, like his kids are similar in ages, and my kids get so excited when they come over. And we've worked on this sort of, I tell them now, when you go to grandma's house, your grandma's house or your grandpa's house, how they always like give you treats or slip you some money. I try to tell them, like, these are still my grandkids, so sometimes I have to, give them a piece of candy. But at the same time, I'm telling you, you have to wait till after dinner. But they get it, they
Yeah.
get it. And I think it's a little bit of a tricky balance. I have to be like, okay,
Yeah.
sometimes I give it to my kids too, of course. I don't want them having any jealousies or anything, but
Yeah.
they get it. And I'm really cognizant of that, making sure that I do give that, special attention that a
Yeah.
grandma would give, even though I'm a busy mom still.
Yeah.
I really want to always honor my commitment to do that and to be that for them. And I think the fact that they're all such good friends really helps so much, because anytime my daughter comes to visit from Utah and she brings her three, they all again just blend right in. They love to play together. And my other son lives about an hour and a half away. He's got two girls, so we have 8 grandchildren, and they're all under the age of 9. So I
Wow.
mean, it works great. And sometimes we have all of them at the same time, all
Wow.
8 of them plus our 7. And it's just like, it's complete chaos, but I
Chaos.
love
Yeah.
every minute of it.
I
I
have
love it because
I
they just
have
love
8
each other.
grandkids also, and
Oh,
mine
do
are
you?
10 down to well, the youngest will be 1 in June. So it's from 10 to almost 1. So I can understand the big family
Yeah,
thing and the
I just
craziness,
love it.
and it's blessed chaos,
Yeah,
right? As I always like to say. So
yeah.
so Pam, how could our listeners, if they wanted to follow you, I know you're on social media, where would be a great place for people to check you out and learn more?
I started an Instagram page about, I would say maybe I was like 6 months into the journey with the kids. And I just really started it as a way to almost blog. I didn't really, had never really been a big, Instagram poster or anything, but I thought, well, I'm going to do this just to kind of share my feelings and share with other people and connect with other foster and adoptive moms and get to know some of the issues that are out there. And so I have an Instagram page that I named Second Chance 7. And the way I came up with that name was really that my husband and I have a second chance at parenting these 7. And so it's our second chance. And in a way, it's their second chance, to have a life that they thought might be completely different. They might have been split up. They were told they might have to go live in different homes, and they had lost their parents. So we're both in our second chance era, you can say. So they're my second chance 7, and that's the name of my Instagram. And honestly, it's not like a typical Instagram. If you go back to the beginning of my posts and you start reading, you'll see some really just insight into what I went through and the journey that we had together. I shared a lot, and nowadays I don't have the time to really be in there blogging a lot and talking a lot about those things in writing. So I mostly just do the stories. Every day
Yeah.
I'll just kind of take out my phone and say, what are we having for dinner, or what are you guys working on, or they're playing, or we're always doing something. We're on vacation, whatever. Next week we'll be at the beach all week because they're on vacation. So I'll have my camera out all week. Just, they'll be digging in the sand and relaxing and having a great time. And so I encourage anybody who goes to my page to go back to some of the beginning posts and read a little bit about our journey.
Oh, definitely. And we'll put a link in the show notes
Okay,
to this episode so folks can easily find you there.
great.
So as we wrap up today, and I think we could chat forever, but we have to
Yeah,
have to land the plane. But
yeah.
most of our listeners are also adoptive parents, foster parents. They're on this journey. Many of them are parenting kids prenatally exposed. So
Mhm.
Pam, I always love to end with some words of encouragement for our listeners. So any advice or words of encouragement you would like to offer?
My advice and encouragement always comes from gaining knowledge. I
Mm,
think that the knowledge that you can gain on how to care for children of trauma is so crucial.
yeah.
I wish that we had had more of that type of training as we were going through our foster training. And I gained so much of it through the years, but I would just read and read and read and try to understand behaviors and how I could help them and how I could best, assist. So there are some great, great books out there, and I have a couple that I like to recommend, but they're probably the ones everyone's recommending. The Body Keeps the Score is a wonderful one for PTSD and trauma. And there's The Connected Child is
Yeah,
one of the first ones that I read, by
me
Dr.
too.
Purvis. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I read it about halfway through my fostering journey, and I was like, oh, that's like this little guy I had, and oh, that's just like, and I just started recognizing so many things. I thought if I had read this before, I would have been a
Mm,
better foster parent from the beginning. I want to go back and start over.
yeah.
So just educate yourself as much as
Yes.
possible is my advice.
Yeah. Great advice. And that's one of the things we like to do here on the podcast and with our resources too. So Pam, thank you so much for sharing your
My
incredible
pleasure.
story with us. We love the stories of second chances. So we love that. Thanks for being with us today.
Of course, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Wow, what an incredible story. I hope you were inspired and encouraged today by Pam's adoption story. Love those second chances. And I hope you really were inspired by that today. And I'm thrilled that you were tuning in and listening. We'll make sure that we have a link to Pam's Instagram in the show notes for this episode so that you can learn more if you so choose to. In addition to encouraging you, also, we are always here to equip you for this parenting journey. And I didn't know when Pam and I started our conversation that she had kiddos also diagnosed with an FASD. So loved that part of our conversation. And as you all know, if you're regular listeners, I am a mom of two teens with FAS. And a facilitator of the Facets neurobehavioral model. So passionate about providing FASD resources and supports to fellow parents who are on this journey. Also, I have, in addition to our Justice for Orphans website, where you can find all that information out about our support group and the trainings and resources, that is justicefororphansny.org. My own personal website where I blog and where I have other resources, sandraflach.com. Also, there's a link in the show notes. There's a link on my sandraflach.com page to an article that I wrote for Focus on the Family, along with some video modules that pair with that article. So there's a link to that and on that website as well. So we have lots of things for you. You do not have to go through this journey alone. I know when my boys were diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome many, many years ago, we were handed no resources whatsoever. So I want to make sure that that doesn't happen to you. We've got lots of resources for you. So I hope that you will check them out. And again, grateful that you spent your valuable time with us today. Make sure that you find and follow us on social media. Justice for Orphans is on both Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And me, your host, Sandra Flach, I'm on all of those platforms as well. So I hope you'll find us, follow us, check it out, go to the website, get the resources, and also feel free to email us and reach out. I always love to hear from our listeners. Have a great week, and we'll see you here next time on the Adoption and Foster Care Journey.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, brought to you by Justice for Orphans. We hope you were encouraged today. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review, and share it with your fellow foster and adoptive parent friends so they can be encouraged too. Be sure to find and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Justice for Orphans. And check out our website for vital resources at justicefororphansny.org.